The two boys had been lying across this stretch of track.
It's been over 30 years since two teenage boys were found dead on these tracks in Saline County. The tracks are still here, and so is the mystery regarding what happened. What's new is a witness has come forward.
I witnessed everything that happened.
He has nothing to gain and everything to lose.
I think he's telling 100% truth.
The new witness speaks out for the very first time what he saw that tragic night, Thursday at 10 on Channel 7 News.
So for anyone who hasn't heard of this case, I think it's almost definitely going to require at least 2 episodes to completely wrap it up, but really I would prefer to do 5 or 6 shorter 10-minute videos, so that way we can cover other topics in between. I mean, there's just so much available information out there, and new details about it are coming out even to this day. We'll go through the basics of the story here in this first video, and if anyone is interested in seeing more about it, we'll dive into the gritty details with the next one. So, on August 23, 1987, the bodies of 16-year-old Don Henry and 17-year-old Kevin Ives were run over by a cargo train in Alexander, Arkansas as they lay on the tracks. They were out hunting at night, and although their deaths were first classed as an accident, later evidence determined that they had in fact been murdered before being carefully placed on the tracks. It's important to point out that virtually nobody believed this accidental death ruling. The medical examiner claimed that the boys had smoked so many, quote, marijuana cigarettes that they were essentially passed out and decided to lay perfectly parallel to each other, directly on top of the tracks, and that they were so high that they somehow couldn't hear the hundreds of tons of cargo and steel screeching towards them or even the train's whistle. Yeah, I know, it's complete nonsense. We'll talk about this medical examiner a little more in a bit. This dude is completely out of his mind, or worse, he was intentionally covering up the facts. The one detail that becomes apparent almost immediately about this story is that the murder was likely covered up. For anyone who doesn't know what was going on in Arkansas during the 1980s, especially in this area, there was a massive drug running operation taking place, said to be tied to some high-level politicians and covert entities. And one of the most popular explanations for the cover-up is that Don and Kevin may have stumbled upon one of these drug drops and therefore had to be silenced. For one thing, the entire investigation was botched from the very beginning, and it really starts to look like both the local and federal government was likely involved in this poorly handled investigation, and as many would suggest, quite possibly intentionally. So, these drug drops were very sophisticated. It was a system of small planes that would fly low over a predetermined drop site and then let the cargo loose, attached to a parachute and a box-like structure that would automatically open upon impact, so then the drugs could be quickly collected by any perpetrators, and then they could almost immediately leave the scene right afterwards. You don't have to fool with it, just pick it up, you're gone. Also, strangely enough, elements of this story are likely tied to the octopus through the Iran-Contra scandal. There's even a major blockbuster movie starring Tom Cruise that mostly whitewashes the story, but it does show some pieces of the truth, including the main pilot smuggler, Barry Seal, being caught by the authorities and arrested, but then being let go scot-free by the state governor, who was at the time, of course, Bill Clinton. So, you see, if these young men really did just so happen to unintentionally walk upon such a high-level and clearly illegal government operation that would not only cause massive embarrassment for the government, but also jeopardize the funding element of a much, much larger illegal operation of supplying weapons to Iran and support for the Contras in Nicaragua, there is little doubt that the players of such a massive clandestine project would murder 2 witnesses in order to keep these largely CIA activities secret. If anyone isn't familiar with the Iran-Contra affair or the octopus, we might do an entire series on that as well, but you could easily make a 10-hour video on it and still not run out of information. In the meantime though, we will include a few links to articles and videos about it in the description for anyone who's interested. So as I mentioned, it was immediately apparent from the crime scene that these boys were murdered, but the investigators refused to treat it as such and stuck to their guns that it was simply some type of horrible accident. But the additional details really point to a strong possibility that they were complicit in an agenda. For example, not disclosing the fact that the boys were covered in a green tarp as they lay on the tracks before they were hit by the train, which was seen by the train operator, who had a clear view of the boys and the tarp before he engaged the brakes. They simply claimed that there was no tarp, and in fact they did such a terrible job on the investigation that Kevin's foot was actually left behind at the scene for 2 full days before it was finally recovered. And while we're on the subject of the botched police work, let's take a look at that medical examiner I mentioned earlier. This guy's name is Fahmy Malek, and I can't understand how he was able to keep his job after some of this. I mean, just listen to some of these other forensic conclusions that he came to during his joke of a career. In one case, a man named Raymond Albright had been shot in the chest 4 times with a .45 caliber handgun, and what was Fahmy Malek's ruling? That it was a suicide. Sadly, I'm not joking. In another case, a man named James Millam was found literally decapitated. His head was nowhere to be found, and Malek ruled that his death was caused by an ulcer, and that the man's head was missing because his dog had eaten the entire thing, including the skull, which is of course ridiculous enough already, but on top of that, the man's head was found not too long after. So, not surprisingly, in the case of Don and Kevin, a separate autopsy was ordered, which was eventually performed by Dr. Joseph Burton, and he ruled that Don had been stabbed to death and Kevin had his face and head crushed with a rifle butt before they were placed on the tracks. I'm going to play a short clip from the documentary Obstruction of Justice, which I actually found on a YouTube channel called Carnage of Ice, who has an incredible video on this subject, and where I actually sourced a lot of the research for this video. I very strongly recommend that everybody watch them both. There's links at the top of the description.
17-year-old Kevin Ives and 16-year-old Don Henry were struck by a train near Alexander. The medical examiner has said that the boys were asleep and drugged with marijuana. The parents, however, disputed that claim and persuaded authorities to reopen the case.
Because of their persistence, Kevin and Don's bodies were exhumed. New autopsies were performed and a grand jury was convened. Dr. Joseph Burton, a nationally recognized forensic pathologist from out of state, performed the new autopsies. His findings revealed that Don Henry had been stabbed in the back and Kevin Ives' face had been smashed by a blow from a rifle butt before their bodies were placed on the railroad tracks.
This information alone would strongly suggest that the boys were injured, rendered unconscious, or even killed prior to their bodies being run over by the train.
Burton's autopsies also revealed that Malek had mutilated Kevin's skull by sawing it in so many different directions that it was impossible to tell where the original skull fractures were. Malek also had completely dismantled Kevin's jawbones. Burton stated he had performed thousands of autopsies and had never seen anything like it. Was Malek trying to hide something?
Was there a stab? The answer is no, they were not stabbed. Were they dead beforehand? Absolutely no, they were alive.
A former employee at the crime lab has said he discovered what appeared to be evidence of a stab wound during the original autopsy, but was told, quote, not to worry about it. Malek has refused all comment.
The deaths of these 2 boys most probably were not accidental deaths, but that they met their death as a result of injuries inflicted on them by other people or another person.
In addition to Burton, 2 other forensic pathologists and 7 forensic investigators with more than 100 years accumulated experience investigating homicides reviewed the case. It was their collective opinion that the ruling be changed to murder.
During the midst of all of the turmoil with trying to get the ruling changed in our case, it became very apparent that this was not an isolated instance of an error in the ruling on the manner of death. There were many other cases statewide that we became aware of.
In 1992, the Los Angeles Times tallied more than 20 additional cases where Dr. Malek had falsified evidence and ruled incorrectly. One case involved the murder of Raymond Albright, who had been shot 5 times in the chest with a Colt .45. Incredibly, Malek had ruled suicide. Another involved James Dewey Milam, whose body was found without the head. In this case, Malek ruled the cause of death to be an ulcer. Although Milam's head had been clearly severed with a knife, Malek claimed the family pooch had bitten off the head, eaten the entire thing, and then regurgitated. Malik says he tested the dog's vomit and found traces of Milam's brain and skull. Unfortunately for Dr. Malik, Milam's head was later found. Malik, it turns out, had made up the entire story. Media coverage of Malik's dishonest rulings resulted in a massive public outcry, calling for his removal from office.
The medical examiner comes up and he has fabrication to where he has created his own evidence.
This is of a magnitude that could create a national scandal, and if necessary, it will.
I have work to
Dr.
do.
Malik, you absolve me.
I have work to do.
Yes, and you can say that you are honest. Dr. Malik.
Lying on his autopsy cases, lying in court. And he's not an honest person.
That's why he should be prosecuted.
He should be prosecuted.
Nevertheless, both Governor Clinton and the Arkansas State Medical Examiner Commission Chairman, Jocelyn Elders, who had the power to remove Malik from office, not only insisted he remain, they gave him a raise.
Based on the facts I have, I really feel that Arkansas owes Dr. Malik a great debt and a real apology.
Today, the governor was asked if Malik should resign.
I don't think that's a decision that I should make based on what I now know.
It's also important to point out that it's been widely claimed that Fahmy Malak was a personal friend of Governor Clinton, and in fact he had even received a 40% raise despite flat-out fabricating evidence and his constant screw-ups. Tragically, not uncommon for stories like this, multiple other witnesses and informants who claimed to have direct knowledge about the boy's murder, they ended up later dying under unusually suspicious circumstances as well, almost all of which are still unsolved. So let me know if you guys are interested in looking deeper into this. I've actually been following this case for about 10 years, ever since I saw the Unsolved Mysteries episode about it. But before you decide if you want to see more, please make sure you check out the Carnage on Ice video. I have no problem going down another rabbit hole with you guys, but I don't want to just rehash someone else's great work. We can look into some of the other elements that aren't as widely talked about, or break things down a little differently. Mostly I just wanted this video to be something of, like a test reel before I get too far into it. Also, give me requests for anything else you want to see as well. We just started working on a series where we will be revisiting some of the octopus to talk about Michael Riconosciuto, but we are also looking into some new information about MH370 and Najib Razak. So we do have a few things that we've already started working on. There's still even quite a bit of very interesting and suspicious news coming out about the Epstein stuff as well, especially with his connections to powerful people and a huge new FBI document release that we haven't even gone through yet. So we're going to end with another clip, this one from a former pro wrestler named Billy Jack Haynes, who actually claims to have been present the night that Don and Henry were killed. So let us know what you think about this. One thing I will say, if he's making this story up, he has definitely done his research, because he has a lot of these details and the names of the players and all of this stuff. He's got it down to a T. So anyways, don't forget to check back soon. We will probably do another live chat this week, so hopefully we will see you then. Peace.
I'm Billy Jack Haynes, former World Wrestling Federation wrestler. Today I come with no mask, I come with no hidden voice, I come to you straight face to face, because this is reality, man. Don't hide nothing. 30 years ago I witnessed the murder of 2 teenagers on the railroad tracks August 23rd in Alexander, Arkansas. 27 years of that I was a drug addict on pain pill medication. I become clean. It kept bothering me and bothering me and bothering me, and finally, when Seth Rich was killed July 10th, I knew that was a message to me, because that's my birthday, July 10th. So here I am coming forward. This is a plea that I'm going to read here for you today. The plea is for those who has yet to contribute to the GoFundMe.com Kevin Ives, Don Henry murders that happened 30 years ago. Please contribute to the fund so that the investigator can continue his work. He says that they still need to interview possible witnesses and gather more information that will assist him in the investigation of the murder of Kevin Ives and Don Henry. Also, You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. Hashtag Kevin Ive, hashtag Don Henry. A former drug trafficker, I'm ashamed to say, and a hired enforcer. In the late 70s and early 1980s, when I was in my 30s, I stood 6'3" and weighed between 260 and 300 pounds. I was very visually intimidating. I'm not proud to say that. In the 1980s, I transported and trafficked large quantities of cocaine throughout the United States of America. I bought cocaine from the largest drug trafficker in the United States, Barry Seal, out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I would then sell that cocaine to contacts around the United States. Barry Seal later introduced me to a politician drug dealer from Arkansas. In 1984, that politician drug dealer asked me to kill David Kennedy, who I later learned was the son of very well-known politician Robert F. Kennedy, the brother of President John F. Kennedy. I was also an enforcer who provided muscle to other parts of the criminal element to ensure that their illegal business dealings were collected upon. In August of 1987, I was contacted by the Arkansas criminal politician and was asked if I would provide muscle at an Arkansas drug stop. The criminal politician suspected that some drug money drops were being stolen. He suspected that the state police officers were involved in the thefts in Arkansas. I agreed to assist with security at the drug drop site. While conducting security for the drug money drop, I witnessed the murders of two young boys, Kevin Ives and Don Henry. They were murdered by other individuals who were working for the same criminal politician. Their bodies were placed on the railroad tracks to be mutilated by a passing train. In late 2016, I contacted Linda Ives and informed her that I was on the railroad tracks, and when her son was murdered, I was there. I have since met Larry and Linda Ives and their private investigator, Keith Ronsaval. I gave them a statement outing everything that I knew about their sons and Don Henry's murders. In my statement, I named 3 local enforcement officers, 2 local attorneys, politicians, and a local bar owner as those being on the scene of the murders in 1987. I also named the criminal politician who directed the events at the scene via cell phone with one of the attorneys, politicians, and me. Your assistance by donating to the Kevin Ives and Don Henry GoFundMe account is greatly appreciated by Larry, Linda Ives, me, Billy Jack Haynes. Please, if you've got it in your heart, I'm standing here putting my life on the line today, telling you that I could very well be killed. Open your pocketbooks, give money to this fund, because they have to be taken down. And Linda Ives, after 30 years, man, 30 years if your son was killed, you deserve some credit too, and you deserve some money coming your way so it can be investigated. Go to the GoFundMe page, please. Thank you very much.